Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Blast from the Past. It's going to be my in depth look at the history of miniature wargaming. So, I learned a lot researching this. I didn't know, even me, I didn't know how far back the history of miniature wargaming went. For a lot of people, their recollections start in the 80s and 90s, and they really don't go any further back than that, other than studying the history of whatever particular game they like. So, like I said, I learned a lot, and it goes way back. And there were times, even in recent history, in the last 30, 40 years, it was actually bigger than it is now, and far more widespread than it is now. So we'll get right to it. The very first recorded event of an actual tabletop war game happened in the early 1800s. Now, there were ones apparently long before that, ancient China, ancient Egypt. Some of those, we don't really have a lot of proof on that. And from what I was able to read, the ancient Chinese ones were more of a variation on chess and not an actual war game. So back in the early 1800s, the Prussians, their generals, devised a game called Kriegspiel. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what it meant was war games. And these were designed to help the generals practice their tactics. It involved dice, so there was an element of chance. And it had a referee. It didn't really catch on. It was super complicated. A lot of actual military into it, right? And it didn't actually catch on with the wider military, Prussian military, until something came along called Free Kriegspiel a few years later. Now we're talking about 1803 to 1808 at this point. And then it caught on. It was easier. In about 1850, the German military was using it too. And it kind of carried on like that. Military is using it. Then along came H.G. Wells. He, the famous author, wrote The Time Machine, and he, along with a friend of his named Jerome K. Jerome, I don't know if it was his pen name or his actual name, he was also a fellow writer, they decided one day after playing around with 2.5-inch tall tin figures and these spring-loaded breech guns, these small things that actually look like cannons, that fired 1-inch wooden dowels, they decided, okay, we're going to make a game. And they called it Little Wars. I've actually read it. You can actually download it for free from the Gutenberg Project. And it was their way of taking these games, these Kriegspiels. There's actually an appendix in the book about taking it a step further, really making a complex game. And they made it for civilian life. They have it's amazing. They have pictures. They have images of their own scratch-built terrain. They came up with rules for movement, shooting, combat, how it worked. There were no stat lines of any kind. They actually didn't like using dice. They said the chance that the dice put into the game actually affected the gentlemanship of the people playing. But so that actually caught on, and a lot of people started playing that. So then you go on a little bit longer, and in 1929, a man by the name of Harry G. Dudell, I don't know these names, they're horrible, I'm sorry, created Sham Battle, How to Play with Toy Soldiers. And this is, I guess, the very first printed rule set in the US. Actually, Little Wars is considered the first actual published rule set for a miniature game ever, I guess, before that point. And so then you jump into the 30s. During, I think, 1935, the summer of 1935, a group of, I think, 15 gentlemen got together at a local pub in London and created the British Model Soldier Society. And it's actually something that's still going to this day. You can actually sign up on their website for a fee, of course. And it's all military miniatures. And it's crazy to survive this long. It mentions on their website they survived through World War II when they couldn't find models anymore because all the metal was being used for construction and ammunition and all the stuff they needed, and members being called into service. But they managed to survive, and they're still around today, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. At this point, lots and lots and lots and lots of rules are being published. There's companies springing up all over the world. It's getting pretty big. And then along comes a guy named Jack Scrubby. I hope I'm saying that right again. Scrubby, I don't know. And what he does is he starts developing games with 54 millimeter figures. He first used metal and then changed to a mixture of tin and lead, which was used up in the 90s. Lead, very bad. Don't touch it. It hurts you. It's poisonous. He's also known for being the guy who first organized a wargaming convention in the 1950s. I think it was 1956. He had a book called War Games Digest from 1957 to 1963. So a lot of stuff's happening. It's all over the place, right? And I'll mention something. There's actually a whole bunch of little YouTube videos I found. I'm going to put them in the description below. Lots of cool stuff. Very cool. I'll get to those in a second. What really was a lot of fun to me finding out was that in 1965, both Sports Illustrated and CBS covered miniature wargaming. So Sports Illustrated had one called A Little War Can Be a Lot of Fun. And then none other than Mike Wallace and Walter Cronkite covered miniature wargaming. That's pretty big. And this is when it's considered to have sort of been opened up to everybody. I mean, if someone like Walter Cronkite and the stuff that man covered and saw says, hey, look, here's miniature wargaming, people are going to pay attention. So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Through the 60s and 70s, it gets huge. There's games everywhere. A lot of them come out with those hex boards. I actually have an older one from, I think, the 70s, which was sci-fi spaceships. Very complex. A lot of them were hugely complex. The spaceships you got on it were actually paper, and you fold it, well, a hard paper, and you fold it together, and that's how you had your ship. Gary Gygax? I hate these names. Who comes up with these names? Why? He releases Chainmail in 1971. That's fighting with fantasy miniatures, sort of medieval miniatures, and that's kind of the beginning. That's where, I guess, before D&D came out. And he actually started using models that were designed by this Jack Scrubby for D&D. So the two kind of combined at one point. In 1975, Jack Scrubby starts making smaller miniatures, right? So, and then the 80s arrived. And that's kind of when everything went downhill. A lot of companies disappeared. It kind of went back underground, so to speak, where, things like D&D, in 83, Games Workshop starts up Warhammer Fantasy Battle, which is kind of more of an RPG miniature game. So everything kind of dips back down. And what was funny is, as reading through and researching all this stuff, we still haven't hit the height that it did before the bust, before it went downhill in the 80s. And that says a lot, considering with the internet and just the way we can connect it. There's still a lot of people who don't have the same understanding of it that we did beforehand. Well, hopefully that'll change over time as people get more and more into it. With companies like Games Workshop and their licensing of Dawn of War and Space Marine and all these other games reaching a higher and higher, like more and more people, larger and larger demographic, it's bound to catch up to that point. I mentioned before I found a bunch of cool YouTube videos. It's on a YouTube page called British Pathé, and what they've done on their page is gather all these newsreels from the last century, and there's a ton of them on toy soldiers and miniature war games. And some from 1930, late 30s, 50s, 60s. One of the best ones is Peter Cushing, who played Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars: A New Hope. And he was actually an avid model collector, and they're just great. They're very kitschy. They're very campy. The guy's got the high-pitched announcer voice, but they're all going to be down in the description. Watch them. They're awesome. They're great to watch. I love them. One of the things I learned about this is there's a lot more to miniature wargaming than I ever thought possible. You think there's these massive companies now, Games Workshop, Privateer Press. The Perry twins have started their own company after they left Games Workshop. all building different miniatures. Warlord Games has their stuff. You've got just so much stuff all over the place. And yet there was always more. There's always been a lot more, and it just kind of disappeared. And so my hope is through these episodes, Blast from the Past, is that we can bring some of those out into light again. I'm going to do the best I can to find out about a lot of these games, a lot of these old companies that have since disappeared, and let you guys know about them so that everybody can kind of have this a larger appreciation for everything that we have now. Because what we have now came from this stuff. If this stuff never happened, we wouldn't be arguing over Games Workshop prices. We wouldn't be arguing over whether Finecast worked or not. We wouldn't be there wouldn't be post after post, right? Of I love this, or I don't like this, or this FAQ is awesome. You wouldn't have Privateer Press putting out awesome models now. You wouldn't have I don't know how many Kickstarters for different tabletop miniature games without this stuff coming first. One of the major ones that we'll be focusing on is Little Wars. It's probably one of the most well-known. Like I said, you can get the book. You can download it. It's fantastic. There's a whole history at the beginning of how they got where they got to. The rules, there's an appendix with even more complex rules, so you can really make the game very interesting. It didn't use any dice at all. So, but it's just amazing. And I will have that for you guys very soon. But yeah, so this is just the first overview. You can see it goes way back, well over 100 years now, well over almost 200 years now since some of the stuff first started in 1803. We're now 2016. It's crazy how far we've come. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, watch the stuff in the description. Leave me any comments or questions. Send something to the email, whotookmydice1@gmail.com. And just tell me what you think. What games do you remember from your past that are now gone? What got you into it? What made you excited? What do you miss? What about all this blew your mind? Let me know. And until next video, I will see you guys around later. Keep throwing dice, keep having fun, and we'll see you later. Bye.